Today I've travelled to Dublin to interview Muad'Dib, and Muad'Dib made a film called 7/7 Ripple Effect, which gives his version of what occurred during the 7/7 bombings in London. Now then, Muad'Dib, could we start just by explaining from 7/7 onwards, what happened with you, why did you make the film, and what led you to believe that the official story wasn't correct? So if we start from the day of 7/7, the bombs went off in the morning and people got wind of it at lunchtime on the news. I believe you were flicking through the channels on the day of 7/7.
Yeah, a friend of mine contacted me from London and asked me if I had heard what was happening in London. And I said, no, why? What's going off? So he said that there's been some bombs go off in London, and that it was on the news, and to put the television on and have a look at what was happening. And so I did that and was flipping channels and seeing the different stories. You have to see the first reports, basically, to get the truth of what's going off, because very quickly the censors get involved and things disappear from the news that were in the initial reports and are never heard again. And if you want to really understand what's going off, rather than believing the government propaganda, which is what it is, you have to get the initial reports and start to put them together. And I'd studied 9/11 for quite some time. I knew that was an inside job, false flag event, and so I suspected that the 7/7 one would also be a false flag event. And when Peter Power came on the television talking about the drill that they'd been holding that morning at the exact same locations, at the exact same times, with the exact same scenario, I smelled a rat. That was it was obvious from that point that it was a false flag. And then I and some friends investigated it after that for 2 years, looking at all the different media reports that we could find from the initial reports and the later ones, and working through all of the evidence that was available to us.
So the initial thing which made you very suspicious was the fact that the authorities were organising a mock terror drill, which was exactly the same scenario of what happened. So you then looked at all of the news reports and other evidence, and there are several other pieces of key evidence which also point to the fact that the official story isn't true. But you made a film based on what you found, what you researched, and tell us about when it was launched and how it was launched and where it was shown.
Well, I wanted to get the film out for the 5th of November of 2007, of the year when we were making the film, which was 2007.
This is 2 years after the event, the film
Yeah,
was.
because I thought it would be fitting for it to be released on the 5th of November.
Yeah.
Because it was telling the truth about the government and all of that. And so it was released onto the internet on the 5th of November of 2007.
And the film is called 7/7 Ripple Effect, and I recommend go and watch the film. You can watch it online, Muad'Dib. 7/7 Ripple Effect. If you type that into Google, I'm sure you'll be able to find it.
Oh yes, it's very, very, very popular all over the world.
And it's about an hour long, and people.
56 or 7 minutes, I think. I made it to be just under an hour, so that if I wanted it to be shown on mainstream television, commercial stations, and hopefully the BBC as well. So I made it just short of an hour so that they could put adverts in it, and make it an hour program.
Yeah, and people really need to watch that film in order to put this whole interview and your case into context. And once they've watched that film, they can then begin to understand where you're coming from in all of this.
Yeah.
So you put that film out, and it's called Ripple Effect because you wanted the message to be spread like ripples in a pond.
Yeah.
Exactly. One person passing on to another person, passing on to another person. Now, let's fast forward then to 2008, when three Muslim men who knew the alleged bombers in 7/7 were on trial for assisting the original alleged bombers, who we all know are now not with us.
Yeah.
Now that trial, I think it was a hung jury in 2008. So they did it. There was a retrial in February 2009 where these three guys were still. The authorities were trying to get a conviction for somebody involved in 7/7, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, your film had already been produced a few years previous.
Yeah.
So, and you were aware of that trial. So tell us about that trial and what it was for and what you did.
Well, the three young men, I've never met them. I don't know who they are. I can't even remember their names now. It's been a while ago. But they were on trial. They were accused of doing hostile reconnaissance for the other four who are no longer with us on a trip that they made to London. And when the jury came to the conclusion that they couldn't reach a verdict, at that point they should have been released because they hadn't been proven guilty. They'd already been in custody for quite a considerable length of time. And at that point they should have been released, at least put on bail, if not the charges dropped, because the jury had not found them guilty, basically. But instead of that, the authorities decided that they were going to hold a retrial and keep them in custody. And so by the time in the second trial the jury reached a unanimous not guilty verdict on the three of them, they had spent 2 years in custody. 2 years out of their lives for having done nothing wrong, which is absolutely outrageous. And during the course of the trial, the prosecuting barrister, or QC as they're called in the UK, lied to the jury. First of all, well, and before that, Judge Gross, when he was selecting members of the jury, I think he had 25 people from whom they've selected 12. And he misled them right from the word go, because he said to them, of course you know that Mohammed Siddiqui Khan, Shehzad Tanweer, Jermaine Lindsay and Hasib Hussain carried out these atrocious attacks. And they can't possibly know that because they didn't do it. They've never been tried in a court of law. The evidence...
There's never been an inquest.
There's never been an inquest.
And just to clarify that point, Muad'Dib, people will say, well, there is an inquest going on now with 7/7. Well, actually, there isn't an inquest into whether these 4 men were guilty. That's not what the inquest is about. It's about the intelligence agencies and whether they could have prevented it. So they've moved the
goalposts.
The goalposts. So the jury was selected by the judge.
Who'd started off by telling them that the 4 original people were guilty. When there is, there's a lot. My film shows lots and lots of evidence that they weren't guilty, that they couldn't possibly have carried out those attacks.
And every day on the BBC News, we hear them describe them as bombers. We hear them describe them as terrorists, the terrorists, the bombers. And
they're still doing it.
Under British law, they shouldn't be allowed to call them terrorists or bombers because they've never been tried.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
So
then once the trial had got underway, once the judge had selected the 12 members of the jury, on the first day of the trial, the prosecuting barrister, or QC as they call them in the UK, Neil Flewitt, told the jury that there was no doubt that Mohammed Siddiqui Khan, Shehzad Tanweer, Jermaine Lindsay and Hasib Hussain had carried out these attacks. Well, millions of people doubt that they did it. And the people who've seen I've had people from all over the world thank me for making the film, including from the UK, saying we had no idea about our government and really grateful to you for having made this film and had the courage to put it out into the public domain. And I had contacts from Spain and from Italy and from Germany, people asking me if I would give them permission. They also thanked me for making the film, asked me if I would give them permission to translate the film into Spanish, Italian and German. And I said yes, as long as you do it accurately, I'd be more.
So you thought that the trial or the court should be made aware of some pertinent facts in your film.
Yeah, yes, exactly that, because the barrister was in fact committing perjury. The QC, the prosecuting barrister, was committing perjury by saying that there is no doubt that these four carried out the attacks when I'm certain that they didn't. And so are millions of other people. So there is a lot of doubt in a lot of people in a lot of countries all around the world that doubt the official story and doubt that these four young men were guilty of carrying out these bombs, these attacks.
So we now come on to what you actually did and the reason why you were arrested, which was because you sent copies of your film, 5 DVDs, I believe.
I sent 5 DVDs to the foreman of the jury in the trial of these 3 young men, and I put the names of the 3 young men because I didn't know the number, the official number of the trial or whatever, and I can't remember now the names of these people. I mean, I have no involvement. It was an injustice that the court was slandering the 4 original ones, who I'm convinced were innocent.
Right.
And so also the fact that everybody was asking for an independent public inquiry into the bombings to find out what really did happen. The relatives of the deceased and the injured and the survivors themselves, many of whom were injured. There were something like 800 people injured.
Yeah.
And these people all want a public inquiry. Yeah. So I thought that by sending my film to the court, to the people who were in charge of trying these people, if I was to send the information to the court to point out to them that they are misleading the jury, in regards to the 4 original bombers at the very least, that would then get my film and the evidence into the court system, into the judiciary, and that then they would have to investigate and they would have to have a public inquiry, an independent public inquiry, which is what everybody wanted.
Yes, and just to stress, Muad'Dib, because some people might think, well, there is an inquiry going on now. It is not a public inquiry into what happened. It is a very narrow scope inquiry into
as they always are.
Right, and it's not an inquest into what happened, whether the alleged bombers were guilty or not. We must stress that, because this thing that's going on at the moment is a bit of a smokescreen, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
All right. So after you'd sent these to the court, and I'll just challenge you on that, Muad'Dib, because should you not send them to the judge? Isn't that not the technicality that they're getting you on here? That you've sent them to the foreman of the jury rather than the judge?
I sent them to the judge as well.
Right.
I sent 5 copies to the foreman of the jury because the jury were being lied to and being misled.
Right.
The prosecuting barrister was committing perjury by doing what he did.
Yeah.
Okay, so they are the people who try the facts and decide the guilt or innocence of a person. So only a fully informed jury can come to the correct decision, to the correct verdict. If they're not fully informed, or if they're wrongly informed and purposefully wrongly informed, then you're going to get a miscarriage of justice. You are going to get the wrong verdict.
But for example, what might happen tomorrow, because it's your hearing tomorrow, we'll come on to that.
Yeah.
Let's say the information was malicious. I'm not saying it is. Let's say it was, and you were to send malicious information to the foreman of the jury. He was to open it and then read it. His mind would then possibly be poisoned for a case. So is that not why you would send it to the judge? Because it's not the judge who decides, and he can decide whether that information is relevant or not. Is this not the case they're going to present to you tomorrow?
No, because they're prosecuting me for sending it to the judge as well.
Right. Okay. All right. So, well, let's just...
But let me just stress that I didn't approach any members of the jury. I didn't stalk anybody. I didn't go to their homes. I didn't threaten anybody. I didn't.
Yeah.
None of that. All that I did was I sent the DVDs in a padded envelope, and it was to the foreman of the jury in the trial of these 3 young men, care of the court in Kingston.
Yeah.
Okay. So they were sent to the court.
Yeah.
And the same with the judge. It was sent to Judge Gross, care of Kingston Crown Court. So I didn't interfere with anybody. There were no messages, there was no threatening letters, there was no letters of any kind. It was just the DVDs, which they could either watch or not watch as they chose.
Yes.
The court authorities intercepted them. It was up to the court authorities, which it would be, to decide whether or not to let the judge and the jury watch the film.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was no danger of perverting the course of justice.
Yes. So
at all.
Unfortunately for you, they didn't consider that as evidence, and instead, well, they eventually arrested you. But before that, that was when they sent a BBC film crew was sent over. After you'd sent the films, but before you were arrested, you were approached by the BBC in Ireland, and they'd already asked you to take part in the documentary, and you'd given your conditions, which were that they show my film at primetime TV, and I will take part in your documentary. So they then kind of ambushed you on the street.
Yeah, with cameras rolling. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel when that happened?
Well, I thought it was disgusting, because I'd given them my conditions. I had said I would take part in the programme if they met my conditions, which I don't think were unreasonable in any way. Yeah. If I was going to take part in their programme, then the public needed to see my film, to see what it was all about, before they watched their programme that I would help them make. And I was hoping that in the process of making the BBC film, if they were honest brokers, which they're not, that it would come out that these 4 young men were innocent, and that that would cause an inquiry, and that you know, I would work with the BBC and with the investigating authorities to get to the bottom of it and find out who the real perpetrators of these atrocities were.
So you just walked past the BBC, blanked them.
Yeah, because I had nothing to. Yeah, I had nothing. People probably say, "Oh, why didn't you answer the questions?"
Yeah.
Because because you're telling lies. I'm not telling lies.
Yeah.
And I walked past them because they had refused to meet my conditions, under which I would take part in their program. And so I walked past them and totally ignored them, because I had said that I would not take part unless they met my conditions. And if I wanted them to meet my conditions, then I had to stick to my guns.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that happened to you, this is when you got arrested. How long after the BBC tried to interview you did you get arrested?
I'm trying to think now whether it was... I can't remember exactly when it was, because it's quite some time ago, and lots of things have happened since then. But it may have been September or October. And of 2008.
Right.
And
after you refused to take part in the BBC interview, you were then, at some point after that, you were then arrested. So tell us what happened.
Well, it was about 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. I was still in bed, and a group of Garda, which is the Irish police, came to where I live and arrested me. They searched the flat. The arresting officer said that it was about the DVD, and that if I gave them the DVDs, that they would leave the rest of the, everything else alone. And he lied to me. And there were about, I'm not sure whether there was 6 or 8 of them, but there were a lot of them. There were 2 in plain clothes who'd come from Dublin, from the extradition branch of the Garda. And then the others were uniformed, and they were local from my area, many of whom I've now made friends with, because I've been signing on at the station there 3 times a week, and I've given them all copies of the film, and they all like it, and they all believe me. And
right. So this was, I think, was this February 2009 we're talking here, when you were first arrested?
Yes, the 10th of February 2009.
And you have then spent 2 or 3 spells in
two spells.
2 spells in a cell, one of 10 days and one of 23.
That's correct.
While you've been waiting for various hearings.
Yeah, that's right.
And the hearing that you've got tomorrow is basically the British government have requested your extradition to stand trial for trying to pervert the course of justice. Is that the right terminology?
Yeah.
And so it's now gone to the Supreme Court of Ireland. So tell us about this case tomorrow. It's the 10th of November today. The hearing is on the 11th of the 11th.
At 11 a.m.
At 11 a.m. Which you were saying earlier is the date which marks the memorial of end of World War One.
Armistice Day.
Armistice Day.
It's known as, and it is the time when, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, they hold a minute's silence to remember the dead from World War One, that they should never be forgotten. When
we are remembering those soldiers that should never be forgotten, we'll be standing waiting for your trial to start, Muad'Dib.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you know, have you got any idea of how many people may be watching? Because it's open to the public, this thing, isn't it?
Yes. It's not actually, I was hoping it was going to be in actually the Supreme courtroom.
Right.
Because that's a bigger courtroom, and it has a balcony for members of the public, and also there are benches at the back and around the sides for members of the public, and probably standing room as well. But it's being held in an adjacent courtroom, which is also it's also a Supreme Court, but it's not the Supreme courtroom.
Right.
And it's called the Hugh Kennedy courtroom. He was the first Attorney General of the Free Irish State, and so it's named after him. And it's a smaller court, but there will be room for the members of the public who are interested enough to come. And there are people coming from all over the world to support me, some of whom are already here, and some will be arriving tomorrow.
You know, how have you been emotionally sort of coming up to this hearing, Muad'Dib? How have you been coping with it, and what are your feelings?
Well, I'm not an emotional person, so emotions don't really come into it. But I'm quite calm and peaceful about it. If there is any justice in Ireland tomorrow, they will throw out this charge against me and refuse the extradition.
Yes.
But there may not be any justice in Ireland.
Yes.
And so they may confirm the lower court's decision to extradite me to the UK.
I mean, do you think in a way that that if you are extradited, it could bring more attention to your film? With a case in London, probably it'll be in London, I guess. Well, maybe not. I mean, they don't have to have it in London, do they? Just somewhere in England, probably.
Well, they don't even have to have it, do they, really? I could disappear.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I could disappear down the memory hole. You know, they could just get rid of me.
Right. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. I mean,
well, that's part of what I've submitted to the Irish Supreme Court, is that my life, the life of my body would be in danger.
Right. If you were extradited.
Yeah, the UK have already been found guilty of assisting in extraordinary rendition and the torture of British subjects in foreign prisons and things like that. So, why wouldn't they do that to me? I've really done them more harm than any of these other people who were innocent anyway, just as I'm innocent of doing any wrongdoing. But I with my film and the publicity that it's had already, I've done them far more harm than any of these innocent people that they've tortured. So why wouldn't they torture me?
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen, Muad'Dib. But just to go back to that question, do you think that by trying you in the UK, it's putting more of a magnifying glass on your film? So maybe politically they might say, well, let's just not extradite him and hope he goes away with his film. You know?
Yeah, that's a possibility. There's no way of knowing which way it will go.
No.
Because, you know, if they want more publicity, if it does go to a public trial in the UK, then the jury and everybody will have to watch the film.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and as you say, the publicity that will stem from that will be enormous. Should be enormous. But we have to also remember who controls the media.
Mm-hmm.
And the media have been used in the UK to try Mohammed Siddiqui Khan, Shahzad Tamimi, the four alleged bombers. The media has been used to try them because it's a controlled media. It's propaganda. It is not the news. It is not the truth. It's always propaganda, government propaganda. And so even if I was tried in the UK, the truth may not get into the media.
Yes. So are you saying that if you were extradited and then you stood trial, would you be able to show your film to a jury?
I would hope so. I mean, that's what the trial's all about, isn't it?
Mm.
It's not about, you know, it's about the contents
Mm-hmm.
and whether the contents of the film would tend to pervert the course of justice.
Yes.
So I don't see how they can hold a trial and not show it to the jury.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I do know how they could.
Yeah.
But if you know, if there's any justice, if it's a fair trial, then they would have to show it to the jury.
Mm-hmm. And have you got any message? You know, because we don't know what the outcome is going to be tomorrow. Have you got a message for people watching this, Muad'Dib?
Well, I would like people to pay attention to what happens tomorrow, because if I am extradited, then there is no justice in Ireland.
Right.
And that ought to really concern the Irish people, and people everywhere.
Because you felt that when you were arrested, that the two plainclothes guys were possibly working in league with MI5.
Yes.
That somehow this European arrest warrant was, you know, got together because there's some collusion in the Irish legal system, and you know, they're not completely independent,
No,
which is what they should be.
They should be, absolutely.
The
yes.
two sovereign nations.
Yeah.
So,
but they're all members of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The judges and the barristers and the solicitors.
Yeah.
No, not the solicitors. The barristers.
Okay.
Okay. And the judges are all members of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the bar is the British Accreditation Registry, and the head of the bar is Elizabeth Battenberg, Mountbatten.
Yeah.
Okay. So it appears that Britain is still ruling Ireland through the legal system.
Yes.
So this independent nation business, it's not real.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, on that note, I'd like to wish you good luck, Muad'Dib.
Thank you.
And hopefully there's going to be lots of supporters there for you tomorrow.
Hopefully.
I really hope so.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be there.
Yeah.
And
I'm just hoping that they don't try to filter people out at the entrance to stop people getting in,
right.
or even filter them out at the airports, because they have been or will have been watching all my emails, taking down the names of people who were supporting me, and they may be on some kind of list at the airports that they can't get in. I hope that doesn't happen. I would hope that Ireland is a little bit more fair than that. Yeah. The Irish people are very nice people.
Well,
on the whole,
if they try and filter me out, I'm going to make one hell of a noise about it, and there's going to be thousands of people hear about it on my TV program, because we need to be there to see what happens, and to see that justice is served.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You know, we just wish you good luck, Muad'Dib.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.